Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Into the Realm, where we fill you in on the most esoteric and interesting geopolitical events, so you can think critically as history unfolds. Today, we will be diving into the tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan to uncover the strategic importance of these two countries of the Caucasus. But before we start, just a reminder to leave a like and subscribe for more dives into the realm. As of late, Iran is finding it increasingly challenging to maintain its balanced approach in the Caucasus. Developments in the region keep weighing on Tehran's diplomatic scales. Two major developments in recent years: Azerbaijan's reconquest of Nagorno-Karabakh and Russia's invasion of Ukraine created diplomatic openings for Iran. The changed geopolitical environment has enabled Iran and Azerbaijan to smooth over what for much of the post-Soviet period had been a prickly relationship. At the same time, Iran's traditionally tight ties with Armenia are coming under increasing strain. But both bilateral relationships remain prone to sudden twists. But before we move on, let's take a moment to understand some of the history. Throughout the 20th century, Armenian and the Turkish-speaking Muslim inhabitants of Transcaucasia have been involved in numerous conflicts, pogroms, massacres, and wars solidified oppositional ethnic identities between the two groups, and have contributed to the development of national consciousnesses among both Armenians and Azeris. The conflicts between these two ethnicities ended only when both Armenia and Azerbaijan were annexed by the Soviet Union. Azerbaijan and Armenia became socialist Soviet Republic states, initially as a part of the Transcaucasian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic, and from 1936 as separate entities within the Union. After the Sovietization of Armenia and Azerbaijan, Caucasian Bureau of the Central Committee of the Russian Communist Party decided that Karabakh would remain within Azerbaijan SSR with broad regional autonomy. The oblast borders were drawn to include Armenian villages and to exclude as much as possible Azerbaijani villages. The resulting district ensured an Armenian majority. But at the heart of this conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the reason for this autonomous region, are not simply about land, but also for religious significance. Concepts of cultural heritage and national identity in Armenia arise primarily from the story of the country's conversion to Christianity in 301 AD. Armenia is widely recognized as the first country in the world to adopt Christianity as its state religion. Armenians view the Karabakh region as an integral part of the world's oldest Christian country, with several early churches located there. Azerbaijan regards Karabakh as an important part of its own territory, with Muslim settlement by Persians and Seljuk Turks going back to the 1100s. While the region is internationally recognized as part of Muslim-majority Azerbaijan, it has been ruled as an independent state with a Christian Armenian-backed government since Armenians there declared independence in 1988 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Armenia's neighbor to the west, Turkey, also has a hostile past with the Caucasus nation. There have been bitter relations between Armenia and Turkey since World War I. From 1915 until the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1923, Turkey expelled and killed an estimated 1.5 million ethnic Armenians in Turkey and the surrounding region. Turkey disputes the number and says the atrocities occurred as were tragedies and not a genocide or systematic targeting. Many Armenians lump Azeris with the Ottoman Turks who marched thousands of Armenians into the Syrian desert and concentration camps without supplies to die of hunger. Ship boatloads of Armenians into the sea to drown and burn entire villages alive. Though Azeris speak a Turkic language, they are distinct from Turks. Azeris also practice Shiite Islam while most Turks do Sunni Islam. But even though Azerbaijan is considered the most secular post-Soviet Muslim country, it has struggled in recent years to ward off pockets of growing ultra-conservative Islamic beliefs, including Wahhabism. The Jerusalem Post reported in 2009 that out of all Christians in Jerusalem's Old City, Armenians were most often spat on by Haredi and Orthodox Jews. Armenia's Muslim neighbors have a history of prejudice against this nation, which makes Iran's long-standing partnership with Armenia stand out. Although, in the present, things are starting to change. Turkey and Azerbaijan have blockaded Armenia for decades. Azerbaijan's blockade was nominally about Nagorno-Karabakh, but Turkey has had no border dispute with Armenia. Its blockade is illegal under the 1921 Treaty of Kars that stipulated the free transit of persons and commodities without any hindrance between Turkey, Armenia, and Georgia. The Turkish blockade forces Armenia to rely upon Iran's transportation system because Armenia's export economy relies on agriculture and manufacturing, and affordability depends upon accessing markets by land. Trade also transits through Georgia, but the country's tilt toward Russia imperils that already limited route. Being the first and only remaining Christian nation in the Middle East, Armenia is surrounded by cultural and political adversaries and is held hostage by the powers surrounding it. Between the 19th and the 20th of September 2023, Azerbaijan launched a large-scale military offensive against the self-declared breakaway state of Artsakh, a move seen as a violation of the ceasefire agreement signed after the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. In 2020, the stated goal of the offensive was the complete disarmament and unconditional surrender of Artsakh, as well as the withdrawal of all ethnic Armenian soldiers present in the region. Just weeks before Azerbaijan launched its 24-hour assault on September 19th, Azerbaijani military cargo planes repeatedly flew between a southern Israeli airbase and an airfield near Nagorno-Karabakh, according to flight tracking data and Armenian diplomats, even as Western governments were urging peace talks. The Azerbaijani government seized territory around the Lachin corridor both within Artsakh and Armenia, blocked alternative bypass routes, and installed a military checkpoint. Late in the afternoon, Nagorno-Karabakh's leadership offered to negotiate with Azerbaijan after it launched its military offensive and called on Azerbaijan to immediately cease the hostilities and sit down at the negotiation table with the aim of settling the situation. The presidential administration of Azerbaijan responded that it was ready to meet with representatives of Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians in the Azerbaijani town of Yevlik. It stressed at the same time that the Azerbaijani offensive would continue unless Artsakh disbanded its government bodies and armed forces. The Azerbaijani Defense Ministry later stated that its forces had captured more than 60 military posts and destroyed up to 20 military vehicles. The Armenian Daily has reported claims that Azerbaijan had captured the villages of Character and Gidevan. Artsakh authorities reported that they had evacuated over 7,000 people from 16 rural settlements, while Russian peacekeepers evacuated 5,000 others. Artsakhi authorities agreed to a proposal by Russian peacekeeping forces to establish a ceasefire. On the 20th of September, under the terms of the agreement, the government of the Republic of Artsakh agreed to disarm and to enter into talks with the government of Azerbaijan regarding the reintegration of the territory. The Azerbaijani offensive killed over 200 Armenians in the enclave, the vast majority of them fighters, and some 200 Azerbaijani troops, according to officials. Large masses of Armenian civilians began fleeing Artsakh after the ceasefire announcement, with many of them gathering at Stepanakert airport. Later, Nikol Pashinyan commented on this that it is obvious to me that this is being done to cause in turn political upheavals and chaos. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited Baku, the Azerbaijan capital, where he praised the country's military cooperation and joint fight against terrorism. Israel has a big stake in Azerbaijan, which serves as a critical source of oil and as a staunch ally against Israel's archenemy Iran. It is also a lucrative customer of sophisticated arms. Azerbaijan still supplies at least 40% of Israel's oil needs, keeping cars and trucks on its roads. Israel turned to Baku's offshore deposits in the late 1990s, creating an oil pipeline through the Turkish transport hub of Sion that isolated Iran, which at the time capitalized on oil flowing through its pipelines from Kazakhstan to world markets. Azerbaijan has long been suspicious of Iran, its fellow Shiite Muslim neighbor on the Caspian Sea, and chafed at its support for Armenia. Iran has accused Azerbaijan of hosting a base for Israeli intelligence operations against it, a claim that Azerbaijan and Israel deny. It is clear that Israel has an interest in keeping a military presence in Azerbaijan, to use its territory to observe Iran. Azerbaijan has raved about the success of Israeli drones in slicing through the Armenian defenses and tipping the balance in the bloody 6-week war in 2020. We're glad for this cooperation. It was quite supportive and quite beneficial for defense. Azerbaijan's ambassador to Israel, Mukhtar Mamadov, speaking generally about Israel's support for the Azerbaijani military. We're not hiding it. In March, an investigation by Israel's Haaretz newspaper said it had counted 92 Azerbaijani military cargo flights to Abda airport from 2016 to 2020. Armenia's position to Iran puts it in opposition with the Western defense sphere. That is largely sympathetic to Israeli defense interests. However, Armenia is now at the beginning of a new deal with the UN and the Western sphere of influence. Armenia's position to Iran puts it in opposition with the Western defense sphere. That is largely sympathetic to Israeli defense interests. However, Armenia is now at the beginning of a new deal with the EU. After talks in Brussels between European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, von der Leyen said the EU would allocate €270 million to support businesses and industry in the South Caucasus country over the next 4 years as part of a new and ambitious partnership agenda. We will make investments to strengthen Armenia's economy and society, making them more robust and stable in the face of shocks, she added, with funds being allocated for electrification and new renewable energy projects. Having effectively suspended its membership of the Russian-led CSTO military alliance of former Soviet states, Armenia has invited U.S. troops to train in the country, dispatched aid to Ukraine, and even suggested it could try to join the EU itself. As tensions between Israel and Iran escalate, Armenia looks to become part of the Western world since it feels it can no longer rely on Russia for its security or economic interests. What this will hold for their way of life is up to speculation. With the fate of the Middle East more uncertain than ever, Armenia cannot rely on past relationships. Von der Leyen also backed Armenia's Crossroads of peace proposals, which would see the country become a transport and trade hub by opening up connections with neighbors like Turkey, as well as Azerbaijan, though it has so far rejected the plan put forward by Nikol Pashinyan. Blinken said in a call that there is no justification for increased tension on the border and cautioned that aggressive actions and rhetoric from any side would undermine prospects for peace. Nevertheless, Armenia shared documents with EU and U.S. officials that allege Azerbaijan has been amassing vast quantities of military hardware bought from countries like Israel and Pakistan. Like many other places in the world, Armenia has a long and tumultuous history that makes its future perpetually uncertain. Landlocked and blockaded by its neighbors, Armenia has little choice but to ride the waves of geopolitical uncertainty in an increasingly hostile world. As Armenia prepares for further land grabs by the Azeris, Iran and Israel escalate tensions, and Russia continues to battle Ukraine, the small Christian nation of the Caucasus must decide how to secure its future. That, however, is where we must end for now. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. See you next time on Into the Realm.